Denmark's royal family stuns the world. King Frederik's shocking abdication plan revealed, the decision nobody saw coming. Welcome to B News. What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and discovered that your king, who has only worn the crown for less than 2 years, announced he's giving it all up? On December 3, 2025, Denmark experienced exactly that kind of shock when King Frederik X and Queen Mary released a statement so unprecedented, so radical, and so completely unexpected that it has left not just Denmark but the entire world of European royalty reeling. This isn't a rumor, this isn't speculation, this is a confirmed decision that fundamentally rewrites the future of one of Europe's oldest and most beloved monarchies. Within hours of the announcement, Copenhagen's streets filled with stunned citizens trying to make sense of what they'd just heard. Social media exploded with millions of reactions. Political leaders scrambled to respond. Royal experts across Europe admitted they had no precedent, no framework, no historical comparison for what Denmark's royal family just announced. And here's the most shocking part. This decision wasn't forced by scandal, health crisis, or political pressure. This was a choice, a deliberate, calculated decision that King Frederik and Queen Mary believe will either save the Danish monarchy or completely transform it beyond recognition. Before we dive into exactly what was announced and why it matters so profoundly, I need you to do 3 things right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell so you don't miss a single update on this developing story, and drop a like on this video if you're ready to understand what's really happening behind the palace walls in Copenhagen. This is a story that will be studied for generations, and you're witnessing history unfold in real time. Let's get into it. The announcement that sent shockwaves through Denmark and across the European royal landscape came at precisely 10 a.m. Copenhagen time on December 3, 2025, when the Royal Danish House released what initially appeared to be a routine statement but quickly revealed itself to be anything but routine. The official press release, published simultaneously in Danish and English, began with language about modernization and reflection, words that have become almost cliched in royal communications. But as the statement continued, it became clear that something extraordinary was being revealed. King Frederik X and Queen Mary announced a comprehensive plan to fundamentally restructure the Danish monarchy, implementing changes so dramatic that they represent the most significant transformation of any European royal house in modern history. The core elements of the announcement include the immediate reduction of working royals receiving public funding, with several family members, including King Frederik's younger brother Prince Joachim and his children, along with various extended relatives who have held ceremonial positions, being removed from official duties and stripped of their places on the civil list. This alone would have been newsworthy, as it represents a more aggressive, slimming down, than even the British royal family has managed to achieve despite years of discussion about reducing the monarchy's size and cost to taxpayers. But that was just the beginning. The statement went on to announce that King Frederik and Queen Mary have formally requested that the Danish parliament begin constitutional discussions about further limiting the monarch's powers and prerogatives. Specifically, they propose eliminating the sovereign's role in government formation. Currently, the Danish monarch technically appoints the prime minister, though in practice this is purely ceremonial and follows the will of Parliament. They also suggest removing various other constitutional functions that exist on paper but have no real practical impact in Denmark's functioning democracy. The reasoning provided in the statement is that these vestigial powers create confusion about the monarchy's role and give ammunition to critics who argue that hereditary privilege has no place in a modern democratic society. By proactively proposing to limit their own authority, Frederik and Mary are attempting to redefine the monarchy as purely a cultural and symbolic institution with no pretense of political power whatsoever. Royal experts immediately recognized this as unprecedented. Never before has a reigning European monarch voluntarily requested that their constitutional powers be reduced. Throughout history, monarchs have fought desperately to retain every shred of authority, making concessions only when forced by revolution, political crisis, or the threat of abolition. For a king to proactively say, "Take away my powers because they're inappropriate for the modern era," represents a complete inversion of royal instinct and tradition. However, even these dramatic announcements paled in comparison to what came in the final section of the statement, the revelation that has Denmark and the world truly stunned. King Frederik X announced his intention to abdicate the throne in favor of his eldest son, Crown Prince Christian, when Christian reaches the age of 21 in October 2026. This means that King Frederik, who only ascended to the Danish throne in January 2024 following his mother Queen Margrethe II's own surprise abdication, will have reigned for less than 3 years before stepping aside. To understand how shocking this is, you need to appreciate the context. Queen Margrethe's abdication in January 2024 was itself considered extraordinary. She had reigned for 52 years and was expected to remain on the throne for life, following the example of Queen Elizabeth II of Britain. When she announced her intention to abdicate in favor of her son Frederik, it was attributed to health concerns and a desire to ensure a smooth transition while she was still able to guide her son. Danes accepted this reasoning and welcomed King Frederik X with genuine enthusiasm and optimism. The expectation was that Frederik, who was 55 years old when he became king, would reign for at least 2 decades, providing stability and continuity while gradually preparing his own son Christian for eventual kingship far in the future. The idea that Frederik would voluntarily give up the crown after such a brief reign is so contrary to expectations that many Danes initially wondered if there was a hidden health crisis or scandal forcing the decision. But the statement explicitly addresses these concerns, making clear that Frederik's decision to abdicate is not being made under duress or due to any problem. Instead, the announcement frames it as a deliberate strategic choice aligned with the broader vision of creating what they call a citizens' monarchy for the 21st century. The statement explains, "The future of the Danish crown belongs to a generation unburdened by old assumptions and free to imagine what constitutional monarchy can be in the democratic age. Crown Prince Christian represents not just the next generation of our family, but the next generation of Danes, and it is they who will determine whether the monarchy continues to have meaning and value in Danish life." By transitioning to Christian's reign while he is young, energetic, and deeply connected to his generation's values and perspectives, we believe the monarchy can renew itself in authentic ways that would be impossible if we waited another 20 or 30 years. The statement continues with Frederik and Mary emphasizing that they will remain available to provide guidance and support to Christian, but that they believe the institution needs his fresh perspective and generational connection more than it needs their experience. This reasoning is simultaneously compelling and controversial. Compelling because it acknowledges the generational disconnect that troubles all European monarchies, controversial because it essentially admits that the current king believes he's not the right person for the moment, that someone younger would do better. Crown Prince Christian, who will become King Christian XI if this plan proceeds as announced, is in many ways a mystery to both the Danish public and international observers. Born on October 15, 2005, Christian is currently 20 years old and will turn 21 in less than 11 months. Throughout his life, his parents have made deliberate efforts to give him as normal a childhood and adolescence as possible, shielding him from excessive media attention and public pressure. He has attended regular schools alongside non-royal classmates, participated in sports and activities like any other Danish teenager, and maintained friendships and relationships largely out of the public spotlight. His public appearances have been limited to major royal events, family celebrations, national holidays, official ceremonies, where he appears composed and appropriate but rarely speaks at length or reveals much of his personality. Those who have met him describe a thoughtful, intelligent young man who is aware of his future responsibilities but has been allowed to be a teenager first and a prince second. He has interests in environmental issues, outdoor activities, and technology, and has reportedly expressed desire to serve in the Danish military, following the tradition of Danish princes receiving military training. However, the reality is that most Danes know relatively little about who Christian really is, what he believes, how he thinks, or whether he possesses the qualities necessary to be an effective modern monarch. This knowledge gap makes Frederik's decision to abdicate in Christian's favor particularly controversial and anxiety-inducing for many Danes. 21 is extraordinarily young to become a reigning monarch in the modern era. While historically there have been child kings and teenage rulers, those were different times when monarchs had regents and advisors who wielded the real power. In today's constitutional monarchies, even though political power is limited, the monarch serves crucial symbolic and ceremonial functions that require maturity, judgment, diplomatic skill, and the ability to represent the nation with dignity and wisdom. Can a 21-year-old, no matter how well prepared, truly fulfill these functions effectively? Critics of the decision point out that Christian will become king before he's had time to complete his education, establish his own household, develop his own public identity, or gain the life experience that typically prepares heirs for kingship. Most European heirs spend decades as crown princes, gradually taking on more responsibilities, learning from their parents' examples, making mistakes in lower-stakes situations, and developing the skills and relationships they'll need when they eventually ascend to the throne. Christian is being fast-tracked in a way that has no real modern precedent, and the risk of failure or struggle is significant. Supporters of the decision offer a very different perspective, arguing that Christians' youth is actually an asset rather than a liability in the 21st century. They point out that constitutional monarchy in Denmark is fundamentally ceremonial. Christian won't be making policy decisions, commanding armies, or wielding political power in any meaningful sense. His role will be to represent Danish unity, embody national values, support charitable causes, and serve as a living symbol of continuity and stability. For these purposes, they argue, what matters most is not decades of experience but rather authenticity, relatability, and the ability to connect with ordinary Danes, particularly younger generations who have been increasingly skeptical of monarchical institutions. A 21-year-old king who shares the concerns, values, and perspectives of his generation might actually be more effective at maintaining relevance and support for the monarchy than an older, more experienced ruler who seems disconnected from contemporary life. Christian's digital native status, his environmental consciousness, his modern worldview, these could make him precisely the kind of monarch that Denmark needs for the coming decades. Additionally, supporters note that Christian will have unprecedented levels of support and guidance available to him. His parents will still be relatively young and active, able to provide advice and mentoring. The palace machinery, the advisors, communications staff, protocol experts, and administrative professionals who actually make the monarchy function, will remain in place to support him. He'll be learning on the job, certainly, but with training wheels and safety nets that previous young monarchs never had. The broader implications of Denmark's announcement extend far beyond the specific question of whether Christian will be a successful king. What Frederik and Mary have done is essentially issue a challenge to every other European monarchy. Are you willing to change this radically to survive, or will you cling to tradition even as public support erodes? The British royal family, still reeling from the Harry and Meghan departure and dealing with various controversies and questions about its future, now faces uncomfortable comparisons with Denmark's bold approach. King Charles III, who waited until he was 73 to become king and clearly intends to reign as long as possible, represents the exact opposite approach to Frederik's rapid abdication. The Spanish royal family, which has worked hard to rebuild its reputation after corruption scandals, must consider whether Danish-style reforms might strengthen public support or simply open doors to criticism and calls for abolition. Sweden's royals, who have generally enjoyed strong public approval through a strategy of modest living and careful protocol, now face questions about whether they're being too cautious and should embrace more dramatic change. And every smaller European monarchy, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Monaco, is watching Denmark's experiment with a mixture of fascination and dread, knowing that its outcome could influence their own futures. The timing of Denmark's announcement is also significant and reveals strategic thinking behind the decision. By announcing the plan nearly a year before it takes effect, Frederik and Mary have created a transition period that serves multiple purposes. First, it gives Christian time to prepare intensively for his new role, accelerated training in constitutional matters, diplomatic protocols, public speaking, and the countless other skills he'll need. Second, it allows the Danish public time to adjust to the idea, to get to know Christian better through increased public appearances and media access, and to either embrace the change or voice their concerns before it becomes reality. Third, it puts pressure on the Danish parliament to move forward with the constitutional discussions that the royal family has requested. If Christian is going to become king in less than a year, there's urgency to clarify what powers and limitations that kingship will entail. And fourth, it creates a narrative arc that will keep Denmark's monarchy in the global spotlight throughout 2026, potentially generating the kind of positive attention and goodwill that strengthens rather than weakens the institution. This is clearly a carefully calculated strategy, not an impulsive decision, even though the announcement itself came as a shock to those outside the palace's inner circle. The public reaction in Denmark over the past 24 hours since the announcement has been intense, emotional, and deeply divided, revealing fault lines in Danish society that go beyond the specific question of the monarchy's future. Thousands of Danes gathered outside Amalienborg Palace in Copenhagen within hours of the announcement, some waving flags and expressing support for the royal family's bold vision, others holding signs questioning the wisdom of putting a 21-year-old on the throne and demanding that Parliament reject the proposed changes. Social media has been absolutely dominated by discussion of the announcement, with #DanishMonarchy, #King Frederik, #Prince Christian, and related hashtags trending globally throughout December 3rd and into December 4th. Danish Twitter and Facebook are filled with passionate debates about whether this represents visionary leadership or reckless abandonment of responsibility. Older Danes, particularly those who remember the stability and dignity of Queen Margrethe's long reign, tend to be more skeptical and worried about the changes, expressing sentiments like, "Why can't things just stay as they were?" And, "We need experience and wisdom on the throne, not youth and inexperience." Younger Danes are generally more supportive, viewing the changes as necessary evolution and expressing enthusiasm about having a king who is closer to their own age and presumably more in touch with their concerns and values. The political response has been cautious and carefully calibrated, as Danish politicians navigate the difficult terrain between respecting the monarchy, which remains popular with a majority of Danes, and fulfilling their constitutional responsibilities to represent public interests. The Prime Minister released a statement within hours of the royal announcement, expressing respect for the royal families, thoughtful consideration of how the monarchy can best serve Denmark in the modern era, while also noting that any constitutional changes would require thorough parliamentary debate and careful consideration of all implications. This carefully worded response commits to nothing while offending no one, which is probably the best that could be expected given how unexpected the announcement was. Opposition party leaders have been somewhat more direct, with some expressing skepticism about whether making Christian kings so young is truly in Denmark's best interests, while others have seized the opportunity to raise broader questions about whether monarchy itself remains appropriate for 21st century Denmark. The far-left parties, which have historically included Republican sentiment in their platforms, are calling for a national referendum on the monarchy's future, arguing that changes this significant should be decided by the Danish people as a whole rather than implemented by royal decree with parliamentary rubber stamping. More centrist and conservative parties are resisting this call for a referendum, recognizing that it could spiral into an existential debate that might result in abolition rather than reform. International reaction from other royal houses has been notably muted in official channels, though private communications between palaces have reportedly been intense. The British royal family issued a brief statement through Buckingham Palace expressing warm regards to Their Majesties King Frederik and Queen Mary as they navigate the future of the Danish crown, which is diplomatic language that commits to nothing and reveals nothing about what they actually think. However, sources close to the British royals suggest deep concern about the precedent Denmark is setting. If monarchies can simply decide to radically restructure themselves based on modern sensibilities rather than maintaining tradition, what does that mean for institutions that derive much of their legitimacy from continuity and historical connection? The Swedish royal family, which has close ties to Denmark through both proximity and family relationships, has been slightly more forthcoming, with King Carl XVI Gustaf speaking briefly to Swedish media about his confidence in Crown Prince Christian's capabilities and the Danish people's wisdom. This can be interpreted as supportive, though notably it doesn't explicitly endorse the early abdication plan. The Spanish royals have remained completely silent.